You're just a burden. Get out. Like, those are the words my son said to me as he shoved $500 into the palm of my hand and told me to disappear before dawn. Simply because my presence in the house made his pregnant wife uncomfortable. 42 years of sacrifice, building his future step by step. And in the end, my value was reduced to $500 and a deadline. So I packed 2 suitcases, got on a bus, and left that city without looking back. He believed that throwing me out of the house would break me. What he didn't realize was that in just a few months, the roles would reverse. And then one day, not far off, when the boardroom door opened, the very son who had called me a burden would be the one begging me for forgiveness. Hi everyone, I'm truly grateful you're here with me today. It means more than you know that you chose to press play on this story. Before we continue, take a moment and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love seeing how far this community reaches, and I read every single comment. And one more thing before we move forward, parts of this story have been thoughtfully dramatized for storytelling and learning purposes. Any similarities to actual people or places are coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is meant to stay with you long after the video ends. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around me like a familiar embrace. Wisps of steam curled upward from the cast iron pot, where beef stew had been bubbling gently for the past 3 hours, Catherine's recipe. The one that always made Stellan's eyes light up when he was young. Each carrot had been sliced into uniform rounds, the beef seared to perfection, until it practically melted on the tongue and just the right amount of time to bring everything together. This meal was more than food on a plate. It was my way of speaking when words failed me, the only language I had left to express love. That smells really good, Dad. Stellan's words drifted in from the other room, hollow and distracted. His attention remained glued to the glowing screen in his hands, his gaze never lifting. I carefully spooned the rich stew into ceramic bowls, setting them out alongside the fresh-baked bread I'd picked up from the bakery earlier that day. Ashley lumbered into the room, her movements slow and deliberate, one palm supporting her rounded stomach, while the other kneaded the small of her back. 7 months along. My first grandchild was coming. This should have filled me with joy beyond measure. Warren, this bread, is it gluten-free? Her eyes studied the loaf with suspicion, as though it posed some hidden threat. Ah, no, it's just sourdough, regular kind from. I can't have that. She lowered herself into the chair with effort, pushing the bread basket away from her. Stellan, you were supposed to tell him about what I can't eat. Stellan's eyes finally left his phone. Dad, we went over this already. Did we? I have no memory of such a conversation. Yet these days there are many things they insist we've discussed that I can't seem to recall. My doctor assures me there's nothing wrong with my memory. I suspect they simply can't be bothered to explain things twice. My apologies, I said, quietly turning back toward the kitchen. Let me prepare some rice for you. Ashley exhaled dramatically, making certain I heard her displeasure. Stellan remained silent. Standing at the stove, waiting for the water to boil, I felt the weight of their silence pressing into my shoulders. This home, the one I'd helped Stellan purchase half a decade ago, the one I'd moved into when Catherine's side of the bed went cold forever. It used to feel like sanctuary. Now, it felt like I was a guest who'd overstayed his welcome in my own son's world. Warren. Ashley's voice cut through the quiet edge with impatience. We need to have a conversation. I returned with a bowl of plain rice, lowering myself into the chair across from them. Stellan's gaze remained fixed on anything but me. It's about the baby's nursery. Ashley started, her hands forming a protective cradle over her belly. We've been discussing it. Your bedroom, we need it. For a moment, the words didn't make sense. I stared at her blankly. My bedroom? It's the largest room in the house. She continued, her voice clinical and practical. The baby needs space, a crib-changing station, storage for all the supplies. Your room gets the best natural light, and the closet is much bigger. Ashley, I fought to keep my voice from shaking. If you take my room, where exactly am I supposed to sleep? Stellan cleared his throat, forcing himself to make eye contact. What I saw there was cold determination. Dad, we need to be honest with you. This situation isn't working anymore. What situation and what's not working? All of it. His hand swept vaguely across the table. Having you live here, it's become too much to handle. Too much to handle. I prepared their meals. I kept the house clean. I made myself scarce when they wanted privacy. I covered half the grocery bills, despite Stellan insisting it wasn't necessary. What exactly was too much about any of that? Stellan, I'm not following. You've become a burden, Dad. The words seemed to physically pain him, but he forced them out anyway. A liability we can't afford anymore. We're bringing a child into this world. We need our own space. We need privacy. We need— His hand dragged down his face. We need you to find somewhere else to live. The world seemed to tilt sideways. My fingers dug into the table's edge to steady myself. You're asking me to leave. The question felt strange and foreign in my mouth. But this is where I live. This is my home. Actually, it's our home. Ashley interjected, her tone ice cold. The deed is in our names. We've been extremely generous allowing you to live here without paying rent for 3 years. But Stellan's absolutely right. It's time for you to go. I looked at my son, truly looked at him. The child I'd raised from infancy, the boy whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose necktie I'd taught him to knot, who'd wanted to make scrambled eggs every Sunday after his mother passed, because he said the smell brought her back to him. That sweet boy had vanished. Sitting in his place was someone I didn't recognize. Stellan, I breathed, my voice barely audible. Please don't do this. He rose from his chair, crossed to the kitchen counter, and retrieved his wallet. With methodical precision, he counted out 5 crisp $100 bills and placed them in front of me on the table. Use this to find a motel room, or an apartment. Frankly, I don't care which. But you need to be gone before the sun comes up. By morning, my voice splintered. That's less than 12 hours from now. Get out of this house, old man. Stellan's jaw clenched tight. The baby needs your room. Ashley sat perfectly still, her expression unchanged. I stared down at the stack of money before me, $500. After 35 years of being his father, this was my value. 5 crisp bills and an order to vanish before dawn. Beyond the window, rain started to fall. The drops tapped gently against the glass. At first, then grew more insistent, drumming harder. My mind drifted to Catherine. She'd always loved rainy evenings. She'd stand at that very window with her coffee mug, warming her hands, a soft smile on her face, as she listened to the rhythm of the storm. What would she think if she could witness this moment? I gathered the bills, folding them with care, and pushed myself to standing. My legs trembled beneath me, but I managed to reach my bedroom, the room that would soon hold a crib instead of my belongings. From the closet, I pulled down 2 worn suitcases, the matching set Catherine and I had bought for our honeymoon trip to Napa Valley 4 decades earlier. I began filling them with my life, clothing, shoes, Catherine's photograph, my chef's knife, the blade I'd wielded for 42 years. 4 decades of being a father, and everything I was could fit into 2 pieces of luggage. The suitcases felt heavier than they should have as I lifted them off the bed. Not because of what was inside, just clothes, a few books, that old chef's knife, but because of what they represented. Everything I was reduced to 2 pieces of luggage Catherine and I had bought for our honeymoon. I stood at the bedroom door one last time. The room that would be a nursery in a week, new paint, new furniture, no trace of me left. I turned off the light and walked into the hallway. The stairs creaked under my weight. How many times had I climbed these stairs? Thousands, tens of thousands. Always with purpose, carrying groceries, helping Stellan move furniture, rushing down when Catherine called me for dinner. Now I was descending them for the last time, and no one cared. Their bedroom door was closed. A sliver of light showed underneath. They were awake. They knew I was leaving. Neither of them came out to say goodbye. I reached the bottom of the stairs and set the suitcases down by the front door. My hands were shaking, not from the weight, from the realization that this was real. This was actually happening. And then Catherine's voice filled my head. Not a memory, something deeper. Something I'd carried for 3 years since the day she made me promise. 2020, 3 years ago. The hospital room was too quiet. The machines had been turned off an hour before per her wishes. Just me, Catherine, and the sound of rain against the window. Always rain when the worst things happened. Warren. Her voice was so faint I had to lean in close. I need to tell you something. You need to rest, sweetheart. No. Her hand found mine, grip surprisingly strong. Stellan. He's not yours. Not biologically. I didn't pull away, didn't gasp, didn't flinch. I know, I said quietly. Her eyes went wide, tears spilling over. You knew, since the beginning. I saw the dates, Catherine. I did the math. But it didn't matter then, and it doesn't matter now. Why didn't you ever say anything? I smoothed her hair back the way I'd done for 40 years. Because he is mine. I was there when he took his first steps. I taught him to tie his shoes. I scared away the monsters under his bed. I held him when you were too tired. Blood doesn't make a father, Catherine. Showing up makes a father. She was sobbing now, her thin shoulders shaking. I was so scared you'd leave if you knew. I was so scared. I would never leave you. Or him. He's my son. He's our son. Promise me, she whispered, gripping my hand with the last of her strength. Promise me you'll never tell him. He can't know Warren. It would destroy him. He idolizes you. If he found out, I promise. I pressed my forehead to hers, breathing in the faint scent of her lavender soap. He's my boy. That's all he needs to know. That's all I need to know. She smiled then, peaceful for the first time in weeks. You're a better man than I deserved, Warren Bishop. No, sweetheart, you deserve the world. I just gave you what I could. 3 hours later, she was gone. I came back to the present, standing in the entryway of a house that no longer wanted me. The wedding photo was still in my jacket pocket, pressed against my heart. I picked up the suitcases, opened the front door. The rain hit me like a wall, cold, relentless, unforgiving. It soaked through my jacket before I'd even stepped off the porch. I walked down the driveway one slow step at a time. The suitcases banged against my legs with every step, but I didn't stop. Halfway down, I felt it, a presence. Eyes. Was he watching? Was Stellan standing at the upstairs window, seeing his father walk away in the rain with everything he owned? I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked back and saw him, there saw regret, saw guilt, saw anything. I didn't know what I'd do. Beg him to let me stay. Tell him I was sorry for being a burden. Break my promise to Catherine and scream the truth. And if I looked back and saw nothing, if the window was dark, if he'd already moved on to baby names and nursery colors, that would be worse. So I kept walking. The rain plastered my hair to my skull, ran down my collar, soaked through my shoes. Let it wash me away. Let it erase 35 years of bedtime stories and Little League games, and teaching him how to cook his mother's beef stew. At the end of the driveway, I stopped, turned around one last time. The house glowed warm through the rain. I'd built that kitchen. I'd painted Stellan's nursery. I'd held Catherine in that living room the night the doctor told us there was nothing more they could do. And now it was just a house I used to live in. Why, Catherine? I whispered to the rain, to the darkness, to wherever she was now. If you can hear me, our son just broke my heart. The lights went out. Upstairs first, then the living room, then the porch light. Darkness swallowed the house whole, and I turned away. The bus stop was 3 blocks north. I started walking. The Greyhound station smelled like burnt coffee and diesel fuel. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. I stood at the ticket counter with my 2 suitcases at my feet and $500 bills in my hand, everything Stellan had given me to disappear. Where to? The clerk didn't look up from her computer. Where can I get for $47? She glanced at me, then really looked at me. Wet jacket, bloodshot eyes, gray hair plastered to my head from last night's rain. She knew exactly what kind of passenger I was. Portland, Oregon. Leaves in 20 minutes. Gate 4. I slid the bills across the counter. She printed my ticket without another word. The bus was half empty. I took a window seat near the back, shoved my suitcases into the overhead compartment, and collapsed into the cracked vinyl. My whole body ached, not from lifting the bags, but from the weight of everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. The engine rumbled to life. The bus pulled out of the station, and California started to disappear behind me. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and closed my eyes. You're a burden, Dad. A liability. Stellan's voice echoed in my head over and over like a song I couldn't turn off. I'd raised him, fed him, taught him everything I knew, and in the end, that's what I was to him. A burden. Maybe he was right. The bus stopped in Sacramento. A young mother got on, maybe 25, with a toddler on her hip and a diaper bag slung over her shoulder. The kid was crying that exhausted, inconsolable wail that every parent recognizes. She looked around frantically for an empty seat, and I caught her eye. Here, I said, gesturing to the empty seat beside me. Plenty of room. She sank down, gratefully bouncing the baby on her knee. Thank you. Sorry about the noise. Don't apologize. Kids cry. That's what they do. She smiled weakly, but the baby didn't stop. The wailing got louder. Other passengers started shooting us annoyed looks. When's the last time he ate? I asked. This morning. I thought I had more formula, but Her voice cracked. I didn't pack enough. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the sandwich I'd bought at the station. Turkey and Swiss on wheat. I hadn't touched it. Here, you need it more than I do. I can't. Please. I pressed it into her hands. I've raised a kid. I know what it's like. She took it, tears welling up in her eyes. Thank you. I turned back to the window while she ate. The baby quieted down after a few minutes, probably picking up on his mother's relief. I should have felt good about helping, but all I felt was empty. Am I really a burden? The question circled in my head like a vulture. I'd worked every day since I was 14. Dishwasher line, cook sous chef, head chef, restaurant owner. 54 years in kitchens. I'd built something. I'd provided. And then Catherine died, and I'd moved in with Stellan because he said he needed me. He said he wanted me close. He said, what did he said exactly? I couldn't remember anymore. Maybe he'd never wanted me there. Maybe Ashley had been pushing him to kick me out since day one. Maybe I'd been too blind to see it. Did I fail him? Did I fail as a father? The bus rolled on. California turned into Oregon. Hours blurred together. We pulled into Portland just after 7 p.m. The city was gray and drizzly fitting somehow. I grabbed my suitcases and stepped off the bus into a place I'd never been, with no plan and nowhere to go. I stood on the sidewalk watching people hurry past. Everyone had somewhere to be, everyone except me. Excuse me. I stopped an older man in a raincoat. Is there a shelter nearby? Somewhere I can stay tonight? He studied me for a moment, then nodded. St. Vincent's, about 6 blocks that way. They'll take care of you. Thank you. I walked, again, always walking. St. Vincent's shelter was a low brick building with bars on the windows and a faded sign above the door. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner and old sweat. A nun sat at the front desk, maybe 65, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. First time, she asked. Yes, ma'am. I'm Sister Agnes. Welcome to St. Vincent's. She slid a clipboard across the desk. Fill this out. We've got beds available tonight. Dinner's already finished, but I can get you some soup if you're hungry. Thank you, sister. I filled out the form with shaking hands. Name, age, emergency contact, I left that blank. She didn't comment. You're in bed 34, second floor all the way at the end. Bathrooms down the hall, lights out at 10. She handed me a thin blanket and a small toiletry kit. I climbed the stairs, found my bed a narrow bunk with a sagging mattress, and sat down. Around me, men were already settling in for the night. Some talked quietly. Some stared at the ceiling. Some were already snoring. I was 68 years old. I'd worked every single day since I was 14, and this was where I'd ended up. Maybe Stellan was right. Maybe I was a burden. I lay down on the thin mattress, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow. I'd figure it out tomorrow. The alarm went off at 5 a.m., a shrill bell that jolted me awake. Around me, men groaned and shuffled toward the bathroom. I sat up disoriented, and then I smelled it. Food. Cooking. But not good cooking. Industrial mass-produced oversalted garbage. I followed the smell downstairs to the kitchen. Through the serving window, I could see a younger volunteer, maybe 30, dumping powdered eggs into a pot of boiling water. He was stirring it like concrete, no finesse, no care. My chef's instincts kicked in before I could stop them. That's not how you cook eggs. They called it breakfast. I called it an insult to food. I'd been at St. Vincent's for a week now, and every morning was the same. Powdered eggs rehydrated with too much water. Toast burned black on the edges, raw in the middle. Coffee that tasted like diesel fuel. The men ate it anyway because what choice did they have? I sat at one of the long cafeteria tables, watching a tray of rubbery eggs get passed down the line. The man across from me, 60-something weathered face, Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, stabbed at his breakfast with a plastic fork and grimaced. First week, he asked, noticing me staring. Yeah, gets worse before it gets better. He pushed the eggs around his plate. Name's Roy Jenkins. You, Warren Bishop. Well, Warren Bishop, welcome to the bottom. He gestured around the cafeteria. Food's terrible, but it's free. Can't complain. You should be able to complain, I said quietly. A man deserves dignity, and dignity starts with a decent meal. Roy looked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. You one of those foodie types? I was a chef, 42 years. Now, no kidding. He leaned back, studying me. What did you do? Lose your restaurant. Lost my family. The words came out before I could stop them. Roy didn't pry. He just nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. I turned my attention back to the serving line. The young volunteer behind the counter, maybe 30, wearing a stained apron and a defeated expression, was scraping burnt eggs off the industrial griddle. He was in over his head. No training. No technique. Just a kid trying to feed 80 men with equipment he didn't know how to use. He dropped a tray. Scrambled eggs splattered across the floor. A few men groaned. Most didn't even look up. The volunteer's face went red. He grabbed a mop, started cleaning, and I saw his hands shaking. I knew that feeling, the panic of a kitchen falling apart around you, the shame of failing when people are counting on you. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Roy asked. "To do something useful." Sister Agnes was in her office, a cramped room off the main hallway, piled high with donation boxes and paperwork. She looked up when I knocked on the open door. "Mr. Bishop, everything all right?" "Sister, I'd like to cook tomorrow. Just one meal. Let me show you what I can do." She set down her pen, her expression unreadable. "We have volunteers for that." "I know, and they're doing their best. But I'm a professional chef, 42 years. I know how to make a good meal even with limited resources. Mr. Bishop, we don't have a budget. We work with canned goods, day-old bread, whatever gets donated. It's not exactly fine dining." "I don't need fine dining ingredients, sister. I just need permission to use that kitchen." She studied me for a long moment. I could see the wheels turning. Was I reliable? Would I steal? Was this some kind of scam? "One meal," she finally said. "Tomorrow's breakfast. You make something the men will eat and we'll talk about doing it again. But if you waste food or cause problems—" "I won't, I promise." She handed me a key to the kitchen. 5 a.m., don't be late. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed 34 listening to the symphony of snores around me and thought about tomorrow. What could I make with canned goods and donations? How could I turn institutional slop into something that tasted like someone cared? At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep. I took the key Sister Agnes had given me and went downstairs. The kitchen was dark. I flipped on the lights and the industrial space hummed to life. Stainless steel counters, a massive griddle ovens big enough to roast a whole pig. It wasn't the gleaming kitchens I'd worked in for 40 years, but it was familiar. It was home. I opened the walk-in cooler. Canned tomatoes, canned beans, day-old bread. Eggs, real eggs donated from a local farm about to expire. Cheese ends, half a bag of potatoes. Onions starting to sprout. Not much, but enough. I pulled out a cutting board and started chopping. Onions first diced small, potatoes cubed. I could make a scramble not fancy but real, with flavor, with care. I worked in silence the way I used to in the early morning hours at my old restaurant. Just me and the food and the rhythm of the knife against the cutting board. At some point, Roy appeared in the doorway. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Something like that?" He leaned against the doorframe, watching me work. "You really were a chef, huh?" "I still am. I just forgot for a little while." "Well, Warren Bishop." He set a hint of a smile on his weathered face. "I hope you remember by morning, because if you screw this up, those guys upstairs are gonna riot." I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in weeks. Then I'd better not screw it up. 5 a.m. came fast. I tied on a borrowed apron stained frayed but clean and fired up the griddle. The men started lining up in the cafeteria, grumbling about the early hour, expecting the usual disaster. Roy was first in line. He grinned at me through the serving window. "The old man's cooking today," he shouted to the room. "This is going to be interesting." "Andy Borst." A few men laughed. Most just looked skeptical. I took a deep breath, grabbed my spatula, and got to work. I had $4.17 worth of canned beans rice and wilted vegetables, and I was about to cook the most important meal of my life. The industrial kitchen was quiet at 5:30 a.m. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the weight of 80 hungry men waiting upstairs. I'd laid out my ingredients on the steel counter like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Canned black beans, day-old onions, half a bag of brown rice, carrots going soft, a handful of fresh herbs from Sister Agnes's tiny garden behind the building. Not much, but enough. I started with the onions, diced them small the way Catherine taught me when we first opened our restaurant. "Respect the ingredients, Warren," she used to say. "Even the cheap ones deserve your attention." The griddle hissed as I swept the onions across the hot surface. The smell filled the kitchen, sweet, sharp, alive. I added the carrots, let them caramelize. Poured in the beans with their liquid stirred in the rice I'd cooked earlier. A pinch of cumin from a donated spice jar. Salt, pepper, fresh cilantro torn by hand. Simple, honest, real. At 6 a.m., Roy pushed through the kitchen door already grinning. "Smells like heaven in here, Warren. You sure you didn't smuggle in a Michelin star?" "Just beans and rice, Roy." Nah." He leaned over the griddle, breathing deep. "That's not just beans and rice. That's somebody giving a damn." The men lined up at 6:15. I could hear them through the serving window, the usual grumbling, the scrape of chairs, the resignation of people expecting the worst. I filled the first plate. spooned the beans, and Rice carefully added a slice of toasted bread I'd brushed with olive oil and garlic. Placed it on the counter. "Good morning," I said, meeting the man's eyes. He blinked, surprised. Nobody said good morning in a shelter cafeteria. He took the plate without a word. I served the next man, and the next. Each time I looked them in the eye. Each time I said good morning. Each time I made sure the portion was generous, the presentation as clean as I could manage with plastic plates and institutional serving spoons. The cafeteria went quiet. I glanced through the window. The first man, a thin guy with hollow eyes, had taken a bite. He'd stopped chewing. He was just sitting there, fork halfway to his mouth, staring at his plate. Then he started crying. Not loud, just silent tears running down his face while he ate. Roy sat down next to him. "You okay, Ron?" The man Ron apparently nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "It tastes like my mother used to make. I haven't felt like a person in so long." Another man spoke up, voice thick. "This is real food. Somebody actually cooked this, for us." Aaron Blake, a younger guy with track marks on his arms and 90 days sober under his belt, didn't say anything. He just nodded at me through the window, eyes wet, and kept eating like the food might disappear if he looked away. The room filled with the sound of forks against plates. No conversation, just men eating with something close to reverence. Sister Agnes appeared beside me, arms crossed, watching through the window. "Mr. Bishop," she said quietly, "what did you do?" "I just cooked breakfast, sister." "No." She shook her head. "You gave them their dignity back." By 7 a.m., every plate was empty. The men stood pushed in their chairs, and several of them came to the kitchen window. "Thank you, chef," one said. "It best meal I've had in years," said another. Roy clapped me on the shoulder. "I told you, Warren, you're not just a chef, you're a damn miracle worker." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent 42 years cooking in high-end restaurants, chasing Michelin stars, plating food for people who ate out of boredom. And here in a shelter kitchen with $4 of ingredients, I'd finally done something that mattered. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the cafeteria, watching the men leave. Some were smiling, some were still wiping their eyes. All of them looked a little more human than they had an hour ago. "For 42 years I cooked to make money," I whispered to myself. "Today I cook to heal souls," and I found myself in the process. Sister Agnes caught me as I was cleaning up. She stood in the kitchen doorway, hands folded in front of her habit, studying me with those sharp, kind eyes. "Mr. Bishop, would you consider staying? Cooking every day I can't pay you, but samp, one, mapo distinct. I'll stay," I said, my voice cracking. "Sister, I'll stay." She smiled a real smile, warm and full of relief. "Then welcome to the team, Mr. Bishop. Breakfast is at 6, don't be late." I'd been cooking at the shelter for 3 weeks when the man with the expensive watch walked in. It was Tuesday evening dinner service, beef stew night, and the cafeteria was filling up with the usual crowd. Roy Jenkins at his corner table, Ron Foster with his construction crew buddies, Aaron Blake sitting alone, 90 days sober, and counting. I knew their routines by now. Knew who liked extra bread, who needed their stew thinned with broth, who'd lost their teeth, and needed everything soft. But this man, I'd never seen him before. He stood in the doorway, mid-50s maybe, wearing dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my first car. His shoes were polished. His hair was gray but professionally cut. And on his wrist I noticed it. When he reached for a tray was a watch that could have fed everyone in this room for a month. He didn't belong here. That much was obvious. But he moved through the serving line like he did. No hesitation, no discomfort. He just picked up a tray and waited his turn. I ladled the stew into his bowl, the same generous portion I gave everyone. Added a slice of fresh bread. Sister Agnes had gotten a donation from a local bakery that morning. Placed it on his tray and met his eyes. "Good evening, sir. Beef stew tonight. Made it with care." He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Thank you." He took his tray and sat down at table 7, right in the middle of the room. Not hiding in a corner, not trying to disappear. Just sitting, eating. I watched him through the serving window while I filled the next man's plate. He ate slowly, deliberately. Cut the beef into small pieces, soaked the bread in the broth, chewed with his eyes closed, like he was analyzing every flavor. This wasn't a man eating because he was hungry. This was a man studying the food. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and looked straight at the kitchen window. Straight at me. A chill ran down my spine. Not fear exactly. More like the feeling you get when someone sees through you, when they know something about you that you haven't told them yet. After dinner service ended, I was wiping down the industrial griddle when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. The The man from table 7 stood in the kitchen doorway, tray in hand. "Chef," he said quietly, "may I speak with you? I'm not really a chef here, just a volunteer. But sure, what can I do for you?" He set the tray down on the steel counter. The bowl was spotless, not a drop of broth left. Even the bread was gone. "That was extraordinary," he said. "I've eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants across 3 continents, Paris, Tokyo, New York. What you just served me, it belongs in that conversation." I blinked. "It's just beef stew, sir. Nothing fancy." "No," he shook his head. "It's not just anything. The caramelization on those onions took patience. The seasoning was precise. The meat was tender but not overdone. You built layers of flavor with ingredients most chefs would throw away. That's not luck, that's mastery." I didn't know what to say. I wiped my hands on my apron, suddenly aware of how worn it was, how worn I was. "Who are you?" he asked. "Nobody special, just a volunteer. Name's Warren. I'm staying here temporarily. Long story." "I'd like to hear it." Once I met his eyes. "Who are you?" He extended his hand. "Maxwell Westbrook. Most people call me Alex. I own a few businesses, real estate, restaurants, investments, and I make it my business to recognize talent when I see it." I shook his hand, confused. His grip was firm but not aggressive, confident. "Mr. Westbrook, I appreciate the compliment, but I don't understand what you're doing here. This is a shelter for people who need help, I know." He leaned against the counter, studying me, like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "I heard about a chef at St. Vincent's who was changing lives with canned beans and day-old bread. I wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true." "Rumors? You've been here 3 weeks, Warren. In that time, attendance at meals has tripled. Sister Agnes tells me the men are showing up sober, clean, on time. Some of them have started looking for jobs again. You know why?" I shook my head. "Because you gave them their dignity back, 1 meal at a time." He paused. "That's a rare gift, and it's being wasted in a place like this." I bristled. "This place isn't a waste. These men—" "I didn't mean it that way." He held up a hand. "I meant you could do so much more, with the right resources, the right support." "On support for what?" He smiled, then a slow, calculating smile. "That's what I'm here to figure out. Warren, let me ask you something. Do you still have ambition, or is this just charity?" The question hit me like a fist. Ambition. I'd spent 42 years chasing at bigger kitchens, better reviews, Michelin stars. And where had it gotten me? Kicked out of my son's house. Living in a shelter, cooking with $4 of donated ingredients. "I don't understand what you're asking," I said carefully. "I'm asking if you want to rebuild, or if you're content to coast on kindness for the rest of your life." "Mr. Westbrook." Alex, I corrected, my jaw tight. "I lost everything 3 weeks ago. My home, my family. I'm 68 years old, living in a homeless shelter, and you're asking me about ambition?" He didn't flinch. "Yes, because I see something in you that most people your age have lost. Fire, purpose, the ability to create something meaningful out of nothing. And I want to know if that fire is still burning, or if you've let it die." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Think about it," he said, pulling a business card from his pocket and setting it on the counter. "When you're ready to talk, call me." He walked out of the kitchen, his expensive shoes clicking against the tile floor. I picked up the card, Maxwell Westbrook, founder and CEO Westbrook Holdings. I stood there for a long time, staring at that card while the kitchen emptied around me. What could he want from a 68-year-old man living in a shelter? "I want you to run a restaurant for me." The stranger's words hung in the air like smoke. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at Max Westbrook's business card, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Before I could think too hard about it, Sister Agnes appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Bishop, Mr. Westbrook asked if you'd join him in my office. He says it's important." I followed her down the narrow hallway to a small room barely big enough for a desk and 2 chairs. Max stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot. He turned when I entered. "Warren, thanks for coming. Please sit." Sister Agnes closed the door behind her as she left, and suddenly the room felt even smaller. "Mr. Westbrook," "Alex," he corrected gently. "Please, Alex." I sat down in the worn chair across from the desk. "I need to understand what's happening here. You show up at a homeless shelter, eat my beef stew, and now you want to talk about restaurants. Who are you?" He smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Fair question. I own Pacific Rim Hotel Group, 20 hotels, 15 restaurants up and down the West Coast. Revenue last year was just over 400 million. I blinked. Then why are you eating at a shelter? He sat down across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Because my father worked 3 jobs and died at 55. Heart attack in a motel room alone, too proud to ask for help. Before he died, he experienced housing insecurity for a few months. That's the polite term. The real term is he slept in his car and ate at shelters. The air left my lungs. I'm sorry. I was 23, working my first real job. I didn't even know he was struggling until after he was gone. Alex's voice cracked slightly. So I made a promise. Every month I visit a shelter somewhere. I eat a meal. I honor his memory. And I test something. Test what? Character. He met my eyes. Wealthy people lie to impress me. Desperate people show me who they really are. I've been testing potential partners for 2 years. You're the first to pass. Pass what I just served you dinner. No, you served everyone with the same respect, the same care. You didn't see donors or charity cases. You saw human beings. And when I complimented you, you deflected. You didn't try to sell yourself or ask for anything. You just wanted to feed people well. He paused. That's the rarest quality in this business, humility paired with excellence. I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking, so I gripped the armrests. I have a restaurant space, Max continued. 2,800 square feet in Northeast Portland. Been vacant for 6 months. Previous owner went bankrupt trying to run it like a corporate chain. But the bones are good. Industrial kitchen dining room for 60 great location near public transit. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to invest $500,000. Renovations equipment, 6 months of operating expenses. You'd have 60% equity. I'd take 40. The number hit me like a truck. 500,000, that's... There are conditions, he said quickly. You hire staff from the shelter. Give them real wages, real training, real respect. And every Sunday you serve free meals to anyone who needs one. No questions asked. My voice cracked. Why would you do this for a stranger? Max stood up, walked to the window again. His back was to me, but I could hear the emotion in his voice. Because someone helped me when I had nothing. A restaurant owner in San Francisco hired me when I was sleeping in my car, fresh out of college with my father's funeral bills crushing me. He didn't just give me a job. He taught me the business, believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He turned around. And because you remind me of my father, what he could have been if someone had given him a chance. Tears burned my eyes. I tried to blink them away, but they spilled over anyway. I'll do it, I whispered. Not for me, for these men, to prove they're not disposable. Max smiled, a real smile this time, full of warmth. He extended his hand. Then we have a deal. I stood up, shook his hand. His grip was firm, final, like a promise sealed. He walked to the door, then stopped. One more thing, the name. What will you call it? I thought about the men upstairs. Roy with his Marine tattoo. Ron who cried over breakfast. Aaron fighting every day to stay sober. All of them deserving more than the world had given them. Second helpings. I said, my voice thick with emotion. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Alex's eyes glistened. Perfect. I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers. We start renovations Monday. He left, and I stood there alone in Sister Agnes's tiny office staring at my hands. These hands that had chopped onions in million-dollar kitchens. These hands that Stellan had called a burden. These hands that were about to build something that mattered. Maybe Stellan was wrong. Maybe I wasn't a burden. Maybe at 68 I was just getting started. 42 years ago, I opened my first restaurant with $3,000 and a prayer. Now, at 68, I was doing it again, backed by a billionaire and a second chance at life. 2 months after shaking hands with Max Westbrook, I stood in the middle of 2,800 square feet of raw potential. The previous owner had left behind grease-stained walls, broken equipment, and the ghost of failed dreams. But I could see past all that. I could see what it would become. The contractor, a weathered man named Miguel, handed me blueprints. Mr. Bishop, where do you want the prep stations? I walked him through the kitchen layout, pointing to corners and measuring distances with my hands. Prep here close to the walk-in, grill station there with clear sightlines to the pass. Dishwasher in the back corner, give them ventilation and dignity. Nobody should feel like they're working in a cave. Miguel raised an eyebrow. You've done this before. Once or twice. By mid-November, the renovations were humming. New floors, fresh paint, stainless steel counters that gleamed under industrial lights. I was there every day watching it take shape, and for the first time since Catherine died, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But a restaurant isn't just walls and equipment, it's people. I posted a hiring notice at St. Vincent's. Within a day, I had 12 applications. Most were handwritten on torn notebook paper. Some had spelling mistakes. All of them broke my heart. Roy Jenkins was first in line for interviews. He sat across from me in the unfinished dining room, his marine tattoo visible under his rolled-up sleeve. "Warren, I'm 62 years old. Nobody hires guys like me anymore. I've been applying for 6 months. Nothing." "Roy, I'm 68. We'll be the oldest staff in Portland, and the best." His eyes went wet. "You mean it? You showed up at the shelter every morning, on time, sober, respectful. That's all I need to know. You start Monday. $18 an hour, tips meal every shift, and a bus pass. Welcome to Second Helpings." He shook my hand so hard I thought he'd break it. Ron Foster came next, the construction worker who'd cried over my breakfast. 58, with calloused hands and a quiet voice. "Mr. Bishop, I used to manage crews, built half the bridges in this county. Then I got injured, couldn't work, lost everything. If you give me a shot in the kitchen, it's sous chef position. You'll run prep and help me with menu execution. Same pay, same benefits. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." Aaron Blake was the hardest interview. 34 years old, 90 days sober, hands that still shook when he was nervous. "Mr. Bishop, I have to be honest. I've got a record, possession. I've been clean 90 days, but source, dans depoticas. Aaron, I don't care about your past. I care about your future. Busser position. You'll clear tables, help with dishes, learn the flow. Show up on time, stay sober, and I'll teach you everything I know. Deal?" He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for this chance. I won't mess up." "I believe you." December was training. I had Roy, Ron, and Aaron in the kitchen every day, teaching them the basics most culinary schools skip. Knife skills aren't about speed. I told them, demonstrating on an onion. They're about respect, for the food, for yourself. Every cut matters. Roy practiced until his onions were perfect dice. Ron learned to break down a chicken in under 2 minutes. Aaron memorized the timing on every dish, when to fire the sides, when to plate, when to call for pickup. We built the menu together. Comfort food elevated with technique and heart. Tom's beef stew became our signature, named after the moment in the shelter when I'd realized food could heal. Braised short ribs with root vegetables, red wine, reduction fresh herbs. Simple ingredients, perfect execution. Granny's mac and cheese, Roy's grandmother's recipe with Gruyere and a panko crust. A Sunday roast. Ron's childhood favorite, reimagined with garlic mashed potatoes and caramelized carrots. Every dish had a story. Every dish had soul. In early January, I hung the wall of thanks. Photos of our staff with handwritten stories beneath. Roy Jenkins, line cook, Marine Corps veteran, loves his grandkids, makes the best mac and cheese in Portland. Ron Foster, sous chef, built bridges for 30 years, now building dreams. Aaron Blake Busser, 90 days sober and counting, working toward a culinary degree. Roy stood in front of that wall for 10 minutes, just staring at his photo. "Nobody's ever honored me like this," he whispered. "You've earned it," I said. The week before opening, I held our first staff meal. We sat together at table 7, the same table where Max had eaten my beef stew, and I served them the menu we'd built. Roy took a bite of his mac and cheese and laughed. "My grandma would be so proud." Ron raised his water glass. "To second helpings and second chances." We all clinked glasses. Even Aaron managed to smile. At the end of the meal, I handed out paychecks, advance payment for the first 2 weeks. Roy opened his envelope, stared at the number, and his face crumpled. "Warren," he choked out, "I haven't earned an honest paycheck in 2 years. You gave it back to me." I gripped his shoulder. "You earned it yourself, Roy. I just gave you the kitchen." February 1st, opening day. The line wrapped around the building before we'd even unlocked the doors. Max arrived in a tailored suit, looking every inch the billionaire investor he was. But when he saw the crowd, he grinned like a kid. "Ready?" he asked. I tied on my chef's coat, white pressed with "Second Helpings" embroidered on the chest. Behind me, Roy, Ron, and Aaron stood at their stations, nervous but steady. "And let's cook," I said. Max opened the doors. The line wrapped around the building, 40 seats inside, nearly 200 people waiting outside. I was 68 years old, and I had never felt more alive. I stood at the pass, the narrow counter between the kitchen and the dining room, watching the crowd through the front window. Young couples, families, office workers still in suits, all of them here, because they'd heard something special was happening tonight. Behind me, the kitchen buzzed with focused chaos. Roy worked the grill, Ron handled prep, Aaron restocked plates and wiped surfaces. We had practiced for weeks, but practice never fully prepares you for the real thing. I clapped my hands once. All right, team. They gathered around me, my crew of second chances. Tonight, we're not just cooking food, I said. We're proving something, to this city, to ourselves. We're showing that dignity matters, that skill matters, that people deserve more than they've been given. I met their eyes one by one. Roy, Ron, Aaron, you ready? Roy grinned, gripping his spatula. Let's show them what old guys can do. Aaron nodded, calm and focused. Ready, chef? Ron cracked his knuckles. Born ready. Then let's cook. Max stepped into the doorway, sleeves rolled up, looking more like a server than a billionaire. First seating's ready. 32 guests. Orders coming in. The printer started chattering. Tickets spilled out, table numbers, dishes, modifications. I grabbed the first one. 2, Tom's beef stew. 1, Granny's mac. 1 Sunday roast. Fire table 3. Yes, Chef Roy called. And just like that, we were moving. The first hour disappeared in a blur. Orders came faster than expected. The dining room filled with laughter, conversation, and the sound of forks on plates. Through the window, I watched faces change with the first bite, the moment when food becomes memory. At table 5, an elderly woman closed her eyes after tasting her stew. When she opened them, they were filled with tears. Her companion leaned toward her worried, but she waved him off and smiled. This tastes exactly like my grandmother used to make, she told the server loud enough for me to hear. A young couple at table 2 photographed every dish not for show, but to remember. At table 7, Alex's table, a group of businessmen ate in silence at first. Then I caught fragments of conversation. We need to bring clients here. Best meal I've had in Portland. How is this place not famous yet? Then table 12 caught my attention. A young woman sat alone, phone propped against her water glass. She filmed herself eating, speaking easily to the camera. I barely noticed until Max appeared beside me, smiling wide. Warren, he said, do you know who that is? A customer. That's Megan Brooks, food blogger, 500,000 followers. My stomach dropped. Should I? No, he said. Don't change a thing. Just cook. So I did. When her order came up, Tom's beef stew with extra bread, I plated it exactly like every other dish, with care, with pride. 10 minutes later, Max showed me his phone. Hashtag second helpings. PDX. Portland's best kept secret. Chef Warren is extraordinary. Every dish tells a story. Every bite heals something. Go now. Over 100,000 views already, Max said quietly. You're going viral. I looked at the screen, then back at the kitchen. Roy flipped steaks like clockwork. Ron plated sides with precision. Aaron cleared tables with professional focus. Good, I said. We're ready. By 9, we'd served everyone. The dining room emptied. The kitchen quieted except for running water and clinking dishes. Roy leaned against the counter, drenched in sweat and smiling. We did it. Ron scrubbed pans slower now. Hardest I've worked in years. Best night of my life. Aaron sat on an overturned bucket, hands shaking not from cravings but exhaustion and pride. Thank you, chef, for everything. You earned it, I said. Max joined us, loosened his tie, grabbed a towel, and started drying plates. Good opening, he asked. I looked around, the empty ticket rail, clean plates, my crew. Yeah, I said, a very good opening. And then it hit me. For the first time in months, I hadn't thought about Stellan once. Not during service, not during prep, not even now. I'd been too busy building something new. Maybe that's healing, not forgetting, just moving forward. The next morning, I woke to 17 voicemails. The reservation system had crashed. The website couldn't handle the traffic. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. I stepped out of my small apartment above the restaurant. Max insisted I take it and check the messages. The last voicemail was from Sister Agnes. Warren, turn on Channel 8. You're on the morning news. I turned on the TV and froze. There I was, standing in my chef's coat in the kitchen. The headline read, From Shelter to Success, Portland Chef's Second Chance. I sat down staring at the screen. 68 years old. 4 months ago, I'd been sleeping in a shelter. Now I was on the morning news. Success has a sound. It's the chime of reservation notifications, the laughter at packed tables, and the silence of a past that's finally stopped chasing you. By March 2nd, Helpings had a 2-week wait list. Food bloggers kept showing up unannounced, filming our dining room. interviewing Roy while he flipped steaks. The Portland Tribune ran a feature, 68-year-old chef's second act becomes city's hottest table. April brought numbers I hadn't dared hope for. 185,000 in revenue. We'd hit break-even in 3 months, something Max said most restaurants took 2 years to do. May came with awards. Portland Monthly named us Best New Restaurant. The James Beard Foundation sent a scout. Roy cried when I showed him the article with his photo in it, captioned, "Former Marine finds purpose at second helpings." By June, we were pulling in $240,000 a month. Steady profit. Real money. I moved out of the apartment above the restaurant into a small place 6 blocks away. 1-bedroom hardwood floors, a kitchen window that caught morning light. My first real home in 9 months. I opened a savings account, put away $10,000 the first month, another $12,000 the second. For the first time since Catherine died, I felt like I had a future. August arrived with the kind of heat that makes Portland natives complain. I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the restaurant, reading the Portland Food Industry Newsletter, a trade publication I'd subscribed to years ago and never canceled. Most of it was boring. New health code updates, industry trends, restaurant openings and closings. And then I saw it, Bishop Dining Group. Struggles continue, 4 locations closed. My heart stopped. Bishop. That was Stellan's chain. The restaurants I'd built. The ones I'd handed him when I retired 5 years ago, thinking he'd honor what I'd created. I scanned the article with shaking hands. Bishop Dining Group, once a Portland staple under founder Warren Bishop, has closed 4 of its 6 remaining locations amid mounting financial troubles. Industry sources cite declining food quality health code violations and mismanagement. I set the newsletter down, picked up my phone, opened Google. Bishop's Kitchen reviews. The results made my stomach turn. Yelp 2.5 stars. It used to be 4.5 when I ran it. The reviews were brutal. What happened to this place used to be amazing. Now it's overpriced garbage. Got food poisoning here last month. Manager didn't even apologize. Never coming back. Dirty kitchen, rude staff. Avoid at all costs. I kept scrolling. News articles popped up. Health code violations at 2 locations. A lawsuit from a customer who'd gotten sick. Photos of empty dining rooms that used to be packed every night. Stellan was destroying everything I'd built. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Anger. Not the hot, impulsive kind. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that makes you think clearly. He'd thrown me out like trash, called me a burden, a liability. And now he was running my restaurants into the ground, destroying the legacy I'd spent 40 years building, ruining the lives of employees I'd trained and cared about. Part of me wanted to watch him fail, to let him crash and burn the way he'd burned me. But another part, the part that still remembered teaching him to crack eggs at 6 years old, that remembered him crying in my arms when Catherine died, that part wanted to save what I'd built. Not for him, for the people who depended on those restaurants, for the legacy Catherine and I had created together. And a third part, the part that had been growing stronger since I'd started cooking at St. Vincent's, wanted him to learn, to understand what he'd done, to face consequences. I didn't know which part would win. That night I was distracted during dinner service. Roy noticed first. "Oh, chef, you good? You've been staring at the past for 5 minutes." "I'm fine," I lied. But I wasn't fine. And when Max showed up for our weekly dinner, a tradition we'd kept since opening, he saw it immediately. "Oh, Warren, you've been quiet all week. What's going on?" I pulled out my phone, showed him the article, the reviews, the photos of closed locations. "That's your son's company?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "It used to be mine. I handed it to him when I retired, and he's running it into bankruptcy." Max studied the articles, his investor brain, clearly processing numbers and timelines. "How much trouble is he in?" "I don't know, but it's bad. 4 locations closed. That's not just poor management, that's catastrophic failure. Do you want to know more, dear?" I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I have resources, Warren. Private investigators, financial analysts. If you want to know exactly how bad it is, debts, liabilities, everything, I can find out. But I need to know something first." "What? Are you ready to face your son again?" The question hit me like a punch. Face Stellan. The man who'd kicked me out, who'd called me a burden, who'd taken everything I'd built and destroyed it. Was I ready? I thought about the last 5 months, sleeping in a shelter, cooking with $4 of donated ingredients, building second helpings from nothing, proving I wasn't a liability. I thought about Roy, who'd gotten his first paycheck in 2 years because I'd given him a chance. I thought about Aaron 90 days sober and counting learning to be a professional because someone believed in him. I thought about Catherine and the promise I'd made to never tell Stellan the truth about his father. And I thought about the restaurants Stellan was destroying, the employees losing their jobs, the customers getting food poisoning, the legacy being buried under debt and negligence. Maybe it was time Stellan learned what it meant to lose everything. "You find out everything whites," I said. Max pulled out his phone, already typing. "I'll have a full report in 48 hours. Financial records, vendor contracts, employee complaints, legal issues, all of it." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He looked up, his expression serious. "Because you remind me of my father, and because sometimes the best way to teach someone is to let them see exactly what they've done wrong. But on your terms, Warren, not his." I nodded slowly. "What do you have in mind?" "If first we find out how deep the hole is, then we decide if we want to bury him in it or pull him out and make him dig himself free. They say knowledge is power." I was about to learn every painful detail of my son's failure, and each one cut deeper than the last. 1 month after deciding to investigate, I stood in Alex's office on the 23rd floor of a downtown high-rise. The view stretched across the Willamette River, but I wasn't looking at the scenery. I was looking at the mahogany conference table covered in documents, financial reports, surveillance photos, vendor contracts, employee statements. It looked like a war room, because that's what it was. Alex's financial analyst, a sharp woman in her 30s named Sarah, had spent 4 weeks building the case. Now she stood at the head of the table, presenting Stellan as empire, like a surgeon explaining a terminal diagnosis. Total debt $2.3 million, 4 locations closed, 2 remaining locations failing health inspections, equipment leases unpaid, employee wages delayed by 3 weeks. The bank is 90 days away from foreclosure. I stared at the numbers. They felt unreal. How had he let it get this bad? And there's this, Sarah continued, sliding a photo across the table. It showed Stellan's house, the house I'd helped him buy, the one he'd kicked me out of, with a foreclosure notice taped to the door. My chest tightened. "Warren," Max said quietly, "you ready for the phone calls?" I nodded. We'd planned this part carefully. I needed to hear it from the people who'd been hurt, not from reports, from real voices. The first call was to Pete Moretti, 60 years old, Italian, built like a truck. He'd been my produce supplier for 30 years before Stellan was even born. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Moretti Produce." "Pete, it's Warren Bishop." Silence. Then, Warren Bishop." "Holy hell. Where have you been?" "I've been trying to reach you for months." "Yeah, long story, Pete. I'm calling about the Bishop's Kitchen account. How's Stellan been treating you?" The explosion was immediate. "How's he been treating me?" "Warren, we had to cut him off. 4 months of unpaid invoices. He owes us $40,000. $40,000. We've been in business 40 years. We've never had to sue a client before. But Stellan, he won't return our calls. Won't answer emails. Nothing." My stomach turned. "He's not ordering from you anymore. He switched to some cheap frozen garbage from a national distributor. No quality, no care. Nothing like what you taught him, Warren. It's breaking my heart watching him destroy what you built." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry, Pete. You deserve better. It's not your fault. But Warren, wherever you've been, I hope you're doing okay, because that kid of yours is drowning." We said goodbye. I set the phone down, hands shaking. Max handed me a second number. "Emily Richards, your former sous chef." I dialed. She answered cautiously. "Hello. Emily, it's Warren Bishop." A sharp intake of breath, then quietly, "Mr. Bishop, oh my God. I thought everyone thought you just disappeared. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Emily, better than fine. But I'm calling about Bishop's Kitchen." "You're not working there anymore." "I quit 3 months ago." Her voice hardened. "Stellan's a nightmare, Mr. Bishop. He yells at everyone, humiliates staff in front of customers, cuts corners on everything. The kitchen's falling apart. The food's garbage. It's not the restaurant you built. It's toxic. Emily, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. You treated us like family. Stellan treats us like disposable labor. Half the original staff is gone. The ones who stayed are only there because they can't find other jobs." She paused. "Mr. Bishop, whatever happened between you and Stellan, I don't know the details. But I want you to know we all miss you. and we all see what he's doing to your legacy." The call ended. I sat there staring at the phone. Max waited. Finally, I looked up. "It's worse than I thought," I said. "He's not just failing at business. He's destroying people's lives. Pete's been a supplier for 30 years. Emily worked for me for 15. Stellan owes them money, respect, decency, and he's giving them nothing." "There's more," Sarah said, pulling up another document. "The 2 remaining locations are only operating because Stellan's delaying vendor payments and skipping health code repairs. The bank is ready to foreclose on everything: the restaurants, the equipment, even his house." I stood up, walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the glass. 40 years, I whispered. I spent 40 years building something that mattered. Relationships with suppliers, training staff, creating a reputation, and he destroyed it in 5. Max appeared beside me. "Warren, what do you want to do?" I turned to face him. "I don't want revenge, Alex. I want justice. And I want him to understand what he's lost. Not just the money, the trust, the relationships, the things that actually matter." "There's a way to do that," Max said, "but it requires capital and timing." "I'm listening." He walked to his laptop, pulled up a document. "The bank is about to sell Stellan's debt portfolio to a collection agency. They'll buy it for pennies on the dollar, probably 60 cents per dollar of debt. Then they'll foreclose on everything, auction it off, and Stellan loses it all. No second chances, no lessons learned, just destruction." "What's the alternative?" Max met my eyes. "We buy it first, before the collection agency. You become Stellan's creditor. You own his debt. You control his future." The words hung in the air like smoke. "How much?" I asked. $1.4 million for $2.3 million in debt. I did the math. If I bought the debt, I'd own everything: the restaurants, the equipment, the leases, and Stellan would owe me instead of the bank. "What happens after we buy it?" I asked. "That's up to you," Max said. "You can foreclose, take everything, walk away, or..." He paused. "You can make him earn it back, on your terms. Make him prove he's learned something." I thought about Stellan, about the boy who used to help me chop vegetables, about the man who'd called me a burden and thrown me out into the rain, about the promise I'd made to Catherine. "I don't want to destroy him," I said slowly. "I want him to understand what it means to lose everything. And then, if he's willing to learn, I want to give him a chance to earn it back." Max smiled. "Then let's make him an offer he can't refuse." You can't fight a war alone. Fortunately, I'd spent 6 months building an army of believers. 2 weeks after deciding to buy Stellan's debt, Max arranged a private investor dinner at Second Helpings. After hours, just 5 men, a 6-course tasting menu, and the kind of money that could change everything. I stood in the kitchen with Roy Ron and Aaron prepping dishes I'd spent days perfecting. This wasn't regular service. This was a pitch, and my food had to speak louder than any words. Roy looked up from searing scallops. "Boss, these are rich people. Why are we cooking for them?" "Because I need them to taste what we do here," I said, plating roasted beets with goat cheese and candied walnuts. "Food is my resume, Roy. If they don't believe in the food, they won't believe in me." "They'd be idiots not to," Aaron said quietly from the dish station. I smiled. "Let's make sure they're not idiots." The private dining room glowed warm under Edison bulbs. 5 men sat around the table, all 50s and 60s, all in tailored suits that cost more than most people's cars. Max sat at the head, looking every inch the billionaire he was. I recognized one of them, Richard Blackwell, real estate mogul, owned half the commercial properties in downtown Portland. If he was here, Max had pulled serious strings. The first course went out. Butternut squash soup with sage oil and crispy prosciutto. Simple, seasonal, perfect. I watched through the kitchen window as they tasted it. Conversations stopped. Spoons moved slowly. One man closed his eyes. Richard set his spoon down and looked toward the kitchen. Our eyes met through the window. He nodded once. By the third course, pan-seared duck breast with cherry gastrique, Max began his pitch. "Gentlemen," he said, standing, 6 months ago, the man cooking your meal tonight was living in a homeless shelter. No money, no home, no prospects, just skill, humility, and a refusal to quit. The investors looked toward the kitchen. I stayed focused on plating the next course. Today, Max continued, his restaurant generates $240,000 a month in revenue.
3-week waitlist, national media coverage, and a Michelin scout scheduled to visit next month.
He paused, letting that sink in. Tomorrow he's going to acquire his son's failing restaurant empire, 6 locations, 2.3 million in debt, and teach that boy how to run a business the right way, with integrity, with care, with the values that built this industry. Richard leaned forward. What do you need from us, Alex? 1.4 million, cash, to buy the debt portfolio from the bank before it goes to a collection agency. Warren becomes the creditor. He controls the terms. He decides the future. And what's our return? Another investor asked. Equity in the new holding company. When Warren turns those restaurants around, and he will, you'll own a piece of Portland's next restaurant empire. But more than that, you'll be part of a story worth telling. A man who lost everything and rebuilt it. A father who taught his son the hardest lesson of all. Max looked toward the kitchen again. Did Warren come out here? I wiped my hands on my apron and walked into the dining room. 5 sets of eyes studied me. Wealthy, powerful men who could write a check and change my life. Gentlemen, I said, voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because good businesses deserve good stewards. My son forgot that restaurants aren't just about profit margins. They're about nourishing human souls, feeding people with respect, treating employees with dignity. I looked at Richard. I built those restaurants over 40 years. I trained the staff. I cultivated the suppliers. I created relationships that mattered. And my son destroyed them in 5 years because he forgot why we do this work. I'm going to remind him, and if he can't learn, I'll find someone who can. Silence. Then Richard spoke. Alex, if you vouch for this man, I'm in. 500,000. Another investor raised his hand. 750. 500. 1 million. 650. In 5 minutes, they'd committed $3.2 million. More than we needed. More than I dared hope for. The next week was a blur of legal paperwork. Samuel Crawford, Alex's corporate attorney, sharp-eyed and methodical, drafted the LLC formation, documents the debt purchase agreement, the terms of ownership. This is airtight, Samuel said, sliding the final contract across his desk. Once the bank accepts, you own everything. The debt, the liens, the equipment, even the mortgage on his house. I signed my name, Warren Bishop. The signature that used to mean something. That would mean something again. Max submitted the offer, 1.4 million cash for 2.3 million in debt. 60 cents on the dollar. The bank had been sitting on bad debt for months, watching Stellan's empire crumble. They'd take it. 1 week later, during dinner service, Alex's phone rang. He stepped into my office, closed the door. I kept cooking, but my hands were shaking. 5 minutes later, he emerged, face unreadable. Warren, step outside. We stood in the alley behind the restaurant, the same alley where I used to take breaks during the early days when success was still just hope. The bank accepted, Max said quietly. As of 5 p.m., today you legally own your son's debt. Every dollar, every asset, every last chance he has. I leaned against the brick wall, breathing slowly. What happens now? I asked. Now Samuel sends the foreclosure notice, certified mail. Stellan will receive it in 3 days. And then, Max paused. Then you decide how this ends. That night I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the legal documents with my signature. Tomorrow, Samuel would send the letter. Stellan would open an envelope that would change his life. And he wouldn't know it was from me until it was too late to run. I thought about Catherine, about the promise I'd made, about the secret I'd kept for 35 years. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I whispered to the empty room. But he needs to learn, and I'm the only one who can teach him. I picked up my phone, texted Alex, send the letter. The next morning I sat in Samuel Crawford's office staring at the final foreclosure documents. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. Mr. Bishop, Samuel said quietly, once you sign these, you legally own Stellan Bishop's debt, all $2.3 million. He'll have 30 days to pay in full or face foreclosure of all remaining assets, restaurants, equipment, property liens, everything. I signed my name. The ink felt heavier than it should. 30 days, I said. That's more notice than he gave me. Samuel sealed the documents in a manila envelope, then prepared the certified letter. I watched him write the address in careful block letters. To Stellan Bishop, CEO, Bishop Dining Group. This will be delivered tomorrow morning, Samuel said. Signature required. I stared at the envelope. Stellan would open it at his desk, the desk in the office I'd built, with his morning coffee. probably distracted by emails or vendor complaints or whatever crisis was burning that day. And then he'd read it. His face would go white. The numbers would blur. $2.3 million, 30 days, foreclosure. He'd call his lawyer in a panic. Maybe Ashley would cry when he told her. Maybe he'd remember the night he kicked me out, the rain, the $500, the cold dismissal. Maybe he'd finally understand what I felt. After leaving Samuel's office, I drove across town. I hadn't planned it, but my hands turned the wheel almost on their own, and suddenly I was parked outside the original Bishop's Kitchen, the one I'd opened in 1982 with $3,000 and a dream. It was closed now. Dark windows. For lease sign taped to the door. Weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. I got out of the car and stood there, hands in my pockets, staring at the building like it might speak to me. 1982. Opening day. Catherine beside me, pregnant with Stellan, her hand on her belly. We're going to build something beautiful, Warren. Stellan at 4 years old, standing on a milk crate in the kitchen, wearing a toy chef's hat, helping me chop carrots with a plastic knife. Stellan at 12, flipping his first egg without breaking the yolk, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Dad, did you see that perfect oust? Expa Bermushor. Stellan at 32, me handing him the keys. It's yours now, son. Take care of it. I leaned against the car, tears streaming down my face. I built this for him, I whispered to no one. Every brick, every recipe, every relationship, and he destroyed it. That night, I returned to second helpings after closing. Max was waiting in my office, his expression serious, in a way I'd never seen before. Warren, before you confront Stellan, there's something you need to know. About me, about Catherine, about Stellan. I sat down slowly. What is it? Max took a deep breath. 35 years ago, I met a woman at a charity gala in San Francisco. She was beautiful, lonely, married to a chef who worked 80 hours a week and came home too tired to talk. We had an affair. It lasted 3 months. My chest tightened. Her name was Catherine, Max continued, voice cracking. Your wife and Stellan. Stellan is my biological son. The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped. I stared at Alex. He stared back, bracing for my reaction. I know, I said quietly. Max blinked. What? Catherine told me before she died. 3 years ago, in the hospital. You knew, his voice rose. And you still raised him, knowing he wasn't yours. He needed a father, Alex. You weren't there. I was. I leaned forward, hands clasped. I changed his diapers at 2 a.m. I taught him to ride a bike. I held him when his first girlfriend broke his heart. I taught him to cook, to run a business, to treat people with respect. Biology doesn't make a father. Showing up every day makes a father. Max sat down heavily, rubbing his face. I didn't know she was pregnant. She never told me. By the time I found out years later through a friend, you were already raising him. He called you Dad. I had no right to interfere. You're right, you didn't. Does Stellan know? Max asked. No, Catherine made me promise never to tell him, and I keep my promises. Even after he threw you out? Especially after. I stood up, walked to the window. Because he needs to learn he failed a father, not learn about biology. If I tell him now, he'll use it as an excuse. Oh, Warren wasn't really my dad anyway. No, he needs to face what he did to the man who chose to love him, the man who could have walked away 1,000 times and didn't. Max was quiet for a long time. Then, when we confront him, you stay silent about this, I said firmly. He faces what he did to me, to the restaurants, to the people who depended on him. The truth about biology can wait, maybe forever. You're protecting him, Max said softly. Even now, I'm protecting the lesson he needs to learn. There's a difference. The original Bishop's Kitchen looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown too big to fit into the past anymore. I stood in the kitchen where I'd cooked my first meal as a restaurant owner 42 years ago. The equipment was outdated now, rusted griddle, dented pots, a walk-in that barely kept temperature. But I knew every inch of this space, every scratch on the counter, every stain on the floor. It was 7 a.m. Max and I had the keys. I owned the property now, along with everything else Stellan owed. We'd arrived early to prepare. I pulled ingredients from the cooler, short ribs, root vegetables, red wine, fresh thyme, Catherine's recipe, the one she'd made when Stellan was 8 and she'd gotten sick for the first time before the cancer, just a bad flu that had scared him. She'd made this stew to show him she was okay, that food could heal, that love could be tasted. Max appeared in the doorway, watching me work. "You're really cooking?" he asked. "And the smell will hit him when he walks in," I said, browning the meat. "He'll remember before he sees me." "This is psychological warfare." "No." I stirred the pot, releasing the scent of caramelized onions and wine. "It's a reminder of what love tastes like." Max went back to the dining room, arranging documents on the table. Foreclosure notices, debt schedules, asset inventories. The evidence of Stellan's failure organized like a prosecutor's case file. By 10:30, the stew was simmering. The restaurant smelled like childhood, like comfort, like everything Stellan had destroyed. At 11 a.m. exactly, I heard a car pull up outside. Before I reveal what I said next, I need to know you're still here with me. If you've followed this journey from the shelter cot to this table type, the number 365, in the comments, 1 year of earning redemption, 1 day at a time. Let me see who's still standing with Warren in this moment. And before we continue, a small note, the next part of this story includes some dramatized elements crafted for storytelling and reflection. If this isn't the kind of content you enjoy, feel free to stop here, no pressure at all. But if you're ready to see what happens next, stay with me. Stellan looked worse than I'd expected. 35 years old, but moving like a man twice that age. His suit was wrinkled, probably slept in, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed. This was a man who hadn't slept in days. Ashley was beside him, 8 months pregnant, gripping his arm like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was pale eyes red from crying. They walked into the dining room and froze. Max stood at the head of the table, every inch the billionaire investor. Tailored suit, expensive watch. The kind of presence that makes people nervous just by existing. Mr. Westbrook. Stellan's voice cracked with hope. Thank God. I thought when we got the foreclosure notice, I didn't know who owned the debt. But if it's you, we can work this out. I have projections, I have a turnaround plan. I'm not your creditor, Mr. Bishop, Max said coldly. Stellan blinked. What then, who? He is. I stepped out of the kitchen, carrying 2 bowls of beef stew. Steam rose from them, carrying that unmistakable scent, home memory Catherine. I set the bowls on the table, met Stellan's eyes. Hello, Stellan. Ashley, Dad made lunch. It's been a while. Stellan went completely still, not frozen, erased, like someone had reached into his chest and stopped his heart mid-beat. His face drained of color, white, then gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. It's Dad. Ashley gasped, hand flying to her pregnant belly. Stellan! Stellan staggered backward, gripping the edge of a chair for balance. This isn't... You can't... Sit down, I said quietly. Yes, this is insane. Ashley's voice went shrill. You were homeless. You had nothing. This is some kind of... Mrs. Bishop. Alex's voice cut through the room like a blade. Your father-in-law owns $2.3 million of your debt. He owns your house. He owns your cars. He owns your restaurants. He owns every last chance you have. I suggest you show some respect before you lose that too. Ashley went silent, tears starting to stream down her face. Stellan finally managed to move. He pulled out a chair, sat down heavily, stared at me like I was a ghost. How? He whispered. I placed a manila folder on the table in front of him. I own your debt, Stellan, all of it. $2.3 million. I bought it last month. The bank was very happy to sell. But you had nothing. You were sleeping in a shelter. Oh, boise staan stort. I was never homeless in spirit, son. Just homeless in a dress. I pulled out a chair across from him. While you were destroying what I built something new. I slid a tablet across the table. Second helpings glowed on the screen, 5-star reviews, revenue reports, photos of a packed dining room, articles calling it Portland's best new restaurant. This is what happens when you cook with integrity instead of greed, I said. When you treat people with respect instead of contempt. When you remember that restaurants aren't just about profit margins, they're about nourishing souls. Stellan stared at the tablet, then at me. I don't understand. You will, I gestured to the bowl in front of him. Now eat, both of you, before we discuss your futures. Stellan looked at the bowl like it might bite him. His hand shook as he picked up the spoon, lifted it to his mouth, tasted, and broke. Tears streamed down his face immediately. Not quiet tears. Gut-wrenching sobs he tried to swallow back and couldn't. This is... His voice cracked. This is Mom's recipe, from when I was 8, when she got sick the first time. She made this to show me she was okay. I wanted to remind you what love tastes like, Stellan, I said quietly. Before we talk about consequences. He set the spoon down, hands covering his face. Ashley reached for him, but he pulled away, shoulders shaking. I waited. Let him cry, let him remember, let him feel the weight of what he'd done. Finally, he looked up, eyes red, face wet, voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? I want you to understand what you've lost, I said. Not just the business, not just the money, the relationships, the trust, the legacy your mother and I built. You threw it all away because you forgot what mattered. I'm sorry. The words sounded hollow, desperate. Dad, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have. Sorry doesn't pay debts, Max said coldly. Sorry doesn't feed the employees you laid off. Sorry doesn't repay the vendors you stiffed. Stellan turned to Alex, then back to me. Then what? What do you want? I leaned forward, placed both hands flat on the table. You have two choices, Stellan. Only two, and you have 5 minutes to pick. His face went pale again. What are the choices? I held his gaze. Let the silence stretch. Let him feel the weight of his own destruction pressing down. Destruction, I said, or redemption. The terms I was about to lay out would either destroy my son or rebuild him from rubble. The choice, as always, would be his. Stellan's question hung in the air. What are the choices? I didn't repeat myself. I slid a thick contract across the table instead. You'll sign over 5 of your 6 restaurants to me, I said. Today, immediately. Stellan stared at the document like it was a death sentence. You keep one. This one, the original Bishop's Kitchen. A flicker of hope crossed his face. But you won't run it, I continued. You'll work in it. The hope died. Work? What do you mean? Outline cook, minimum wage, 1 year. Silence. Ashley's hand went to her mouth. I 5 a.m. shifts, I said. 6 days a week. You'll prep vegetables, scrub grills, take orders from anyone I put above you. You'll do the work you made other people do while you sat in an office making bad decisions. Stellan's face went white. You want me to cook? I want you to remember what it means to serve instead of exploit, to create instead of consume, to earn respect instead of demand it. I leaned forward. If you complete the full year with humility and real skill, I'll return 2 locations to you, to manage not own, under my supervision. But if you quit, complain, or fail, you lose this last location too. Everything becomes mine. And if I refuse, Stellan's voice was barely audible. Option 2, I file for closure tomorrow. You declare bankruptcy, lose everything anyway. I pulled out another folder. Plus, I have documentation of financial mismanagement, vendor fraud, employee wage theft. I will prosecute. Stellan's hands started shaking. Your choice, son, 1 year of humility, or 10 years, explaining to a judge why you stole from your own company. Stellan broke. Not slowly, all at once. His face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. He covered his mouth with one hand, shoulders shaking. Dad, His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I called you a burden. I threw you out in the rain with $500 and told you to disappear. I took everything you built, everything Mom and you created together, and I destroyed it. He looked up at me, eyes red. Why would you offer me a chance? Why not just end me? My own voice went thick. Because you're my son, Stellan. He shook his head violently. I don't deserve to be your son. I paused. Let the words sit between us. Let him feel their weight. You're right, I said quietly. You don't, not yet. He flinched like I'd hit him. But you can earn it back. 1 plate at a time, 1 shift at a time. That's what redemption means, Stellan. It isn't given, it's earned. Through sweat and humility, and proving you've learned what matters. Ashley spoke up, voice trembling. Mr. Bishop, this is my fault too. I turned to her. She was crying now, hands on her pregnant belly. I pushed Stellan to make you leave. My family, we'd lost everything in a bankruptcy 2 years ago. I panicked when I got pregnant. I thought we needed space, needed to cut expenses needed. She sobbed. I was scared, but fear doesn't excuse cruelty. I'm sorry. I studied her. 28 years old, terrified, about to have a baby in a world that had just collapsed around her. You'll work too, Ashley. I said gentler now. Hostess position, same terms, same wage, same year. You'll greet every customer with respect. You'll learn that people aren't obstacles, they're the whole point. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you, Dad. I'll do it, I promise. Max stood then, commanding the room without raising his voice. Stellan, let me tell you what I see from the outside, he said. I see a man who inherited an empire and convinced himself he built it. I see someone who valued a business degree over 42 years of master-level practice. I see someone who measured his father's worth in dollars and found him lacking. He paused, and for a split second I saw something flicker across his face, guilt, regret, something deep. He almost said more. I caught his eye, shook my head slightly. He changed direction. Don't spend your life regretting this moment. Sign the papers. Do the work. Become the man your father tried to raise you to be. Stellan picked up the pen with shaking hands. I watched him sign document after document. Transfers of ownership, employment contracts, non-compete clauses. Every stroke of ink was a piece of his ego dying. When he finished, he set the pen down and looked at me. Dad, there's one more thing. The baby. What about it? We decided on the name months ago. Even after his voice broke. Even after I made you leave. Ashley spoke up. We're naming him Owen. Stellan wiped his eyes. I almost named him Warren, after you. Even after throwing you out, part of me knew I'd made the worst mistake of my life. But I couldn't. It felt like I'd lost the right. I covered my face, shoulders shaking. 42 years of fatherhood, and he'd almost named his son after me despite everything. Behind me, I heard Max turn away. When I glanced back, his eyes were wet too. His biological grandson named after the man who'd raised his son. I pulled myself together, stood up, walked around the table, and placed both hands on Stellan's shoulders. You start Monday, I said. 5 a.m., Second Helping's kitchen. Bring good shoes, not designer brands, real work boots. Kitchen is hard on old men like us, but it teaches things business school never could. Stellan nodded, unable to speak. Go home, get some rest. Say goodbye to the man you were, because Monday morning you become someone new. They left. Stellan and Ashley walking out into the afternoon light, defeated but somehow lighter, like the weight of pretending had finally been lifted. I stood at the window watching them drive away. Max appeared beside me. You could have told him I'm his biological father. Why didn't you? Because today was about him learning he failed a father, not about DNA. If I tell him now, it becomes a distraction, maybe even an excuse. Oh, Warren wasn't really my dad anyway. I shook my head. No, he needs to face what he did to the man who chose to love him. When will you tell him? Maybe never. Maybe when he's strong enough to receive it without derailing his progress. Right now, he needs to learn humility. Everything else can wait. Max was quiet for a long time. Then, you're a better man than I could ever be. No, I said. I'm just a father, and that's enough. That night alone in my apartment, I stood by the window with a cup of coffee I didn't drink. The city lights blurred through the glass. Monday, Stellan would walk into my kitchen. He'd put on an apron. He'd take orders. He'd learn, or he wouldn't. The hard part was starting now. Punishment was easy. Education was the real work. And I had 1 year to teach him what I couldn't in 35 years. 1 year to prove that redemption isn't a gift. It's a choice you make every single day. Stellan arrived at 5:02 in the morning, just 2 minutes past the hour. But in a professional kitchen, my kitchen, those 2 minutes carried the weight of broken promises and burnt opportunities. He pushed through the back entrance of Second Helpings with the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who'd spent the night wrestling with demons. Purple shadows pooled beneath his eyes. His shirt looked like he'd pulled it from the laundry basket rather than the closet. This was the face of a man confronting the reality that everything he'd known had irrevocably shifted beneath his feet. I kept my voice level, no shouting required. You're late. It's barely 2 minutes. 2 minutes in a kitchen translates to overcooked protein and customers walking out unsatisfied. Roy's going to walk you through prep work. I watched his mouth open, ready with some excuse or justification. Then something stopped him. He closed it again, gave a single nod of acknowledgement. The first lesson had already taken root. Punctuality isn't negotiable. Roy Jenkins emerged from the walk-in refrigerator, his weathered arms cradling an impressive load of fresh produce. At 62, this Marine Corps veteran who'd once had no roof over his head now stood as the most dependable member of my kitchen brigade. Morning, boss. Roy greeted me with his characteristic efficiency. His attention shifted to Stellan. Looks like you're working with me today, kid. That single word kid hung in the air with delicious irony. Here stood Stellan Bishop, 35 years old, holder of a prestigious MBA from Stanford University, former chief executive of a restaurant empire. And now he was receiving instructions from a man whose resume he would have dismissed without a second glance in his previous life. A man whose qualifications on paper would never have earned an interview. The poetic justice of the moment wasn't lost on anyone present, certainly not on me, not on Roy, and based on the subtle shift in Stellan's expression, not on him either. "There's an apron hanging by the door," Roy instructed, gesturing toward the prep area. "Your station's set up over here. Today you're handling the basics peeling duty. We need 50 pounds each of onions, potatoes, and carrots processed before the lunch service begins at 11. Stellan's gaze traveled to the mountainous pile of vegetables awaiting his attention. His face registered something between disbelief and resignation. 50 pounds of each? That going to be an issue? Roy's tone remained neutral, almost gentle. No issue at all. Excellent. Then let's get moving. I observed as Stellan selected a peeler from the magnetic strip on the wall. His hands told their own story, smooth, unmarked, the hands of someone who'd spent years in climate-controlled offices. These were hands trained to grip fountain pens and navigate keyboards, not to endure the repetitive strain of manual kitchen labor, hour after hour. 20 minutes into his task, the physical toll became evident. I noticed the way he kept pausing to flex his fingers, attempting to coax relief into cramping muscles, unaccustomed to this particular form of stress. Roy picked up on it immediately. "You're moving slower than I do, kid, and I've got 27 years on you." Stellan's jaw tightened with determination, but he didn't complain. He just continued peeling one vegetable after another. Within the hour, perspiration was running freely down his temples. His shirt had become a second skin plastered to his spine with sweat. The kitchen maintained its characteristic oppressive heat. There was no climate control back here in the prep area. Just a couple of industrial fans that did little more than push the hot air around in lazy circles. I maintained my position at the pass, organizing my mise en place for the upcoming lunch rush. But my attention kept returning to Stellan. I watched him grapple with the physical demands. Watched the gradual dawning of understanding cross his features as he began to comprehend what I'd been doing for 4 decades. What Catherine had done beside me. What every single person in this brutal, beautiful industry endures, not because the work is easy, but because they genuinely love the craft. The kitchen's rhythm was interrupted at 8:30 when Stellan's phone began vibrating insistently in his pocket. He fumbled for it with his raw, aching hands. The screen displayed Ashley's name. His face went ashen. "Stellan." Her voice pierced through the speaker, sharp with panic and urgency. "My water broke. The baby's coming. I need you here, right now." The peeler clattered against the stainless steel counter as Stellan released it. "I have to leave. This second. Complete your prep first," I stated calmly, checking my watch. "Give it another 30 minutes. He wheeled around to face me, his eyes enormous with shock and indignation. "My wife is in labor with our child, and she'll continue to be in labor 30 minutes from now," I replied with the same measured calm. "The team here is counting on you to complete your assigned station, finish what you started. Then you can go." "This is completely insane." "No." I closed the distance between us, forcing him to meet my gaze directly. "This is what responsibility looks like. Aaron will step in to cover your station the moment you've properly finished your work. But you don't abandon your teammates in the middle of service preparation. Not for anything. This is what it means to be part of something larger than your individual needs." Stellan's entire body went rigid. His hands trembled with a volatile cocktail of rage, terror, and frustration fighting for dominance. But then something remarkable happened. He picked the peeler back up, and he worked. He moved faster than I'd witnessed all morning. His hands became a blur of focused motion, flying through the remaining onions and potatoes with newfound urgency. He ignored the cramping in his fingers. He ignored his phone as it continued buzzing with updates from Ashley's sister, tracking the progression of labor. 28 minutes later, he set down the peeler beside the last peeled carrot. Roy conducted a thorough inspection of the completed work. He gave a single nod of approval. "Solid work. Now get out of here. And congratulations, kid." "Aaron," I called across the kitchen. "Stellan's station needs coverage." Aaron materialized from the dishwashing area, offering Stellan an encouraging nod. "Go be with your wife, man. We've got this handled." Stellan's eyes found mine. Something intangible passed between us. In that moment, perhaps a glimmer of mutual understanding, or maybe just shared exhaustion from the morning's intensity. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Be here tomorrow, 5 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." He ran for the door like his life depended on it. As evening service wound down, I loaded several containers with food I'd prepared during the dinner rush. Real, nourishing meals, not the barely edible offerings typical of hospital cafeterias. Stellan was stationed in the maternity ward waiting room when I arrived. His hands bore the day's evidence, small cuts, minor burns, the marks of someone who'd spent their first real day working a kitchen line. He glanced up as I approached. "Dad, you actually came." "Of course I came. You're still my son. And that baby is my grandson." Moisture gathered in his eyes. He rose to his feet, and for a fleeting moment I thought he might embrace me. Instead, he simply nodded, seeming unable to trust his voice. "Ashley's still in the delivery room. It's been going on for hours now. First births rarely come quickly. Here." I pressed the food containers into his hands. "Make sure Ashley eats something when there's a break. She's going to need every bit of strength she can get." Roughly an hour later, a nurse in pale blue scrubs emerged through the double doors. "Mr. Bishop, your son has arrived. You can come meet him now." Owen Bishop entered the world weighing 7 pounds and 3 ounces. His lungs were clearly healthy, evidenced by his vigorous crying, perfect tiny fingers, a surprising amount of dark hair for a newborn. He lay swaddled in the standard hospital blanket, his eyes squeezed tightly shut against the harsh lights, making small mewling sounds that hadn't quite developed into full cries yet. Stellan cradled him with extreme care, as though the infant might shatter at the slightest wrong movement. Ashley looked utterly depleted, her hair matted against her forehead with the effort of labor, but her face shone with an exhausted, triumphant smile. "Dad," Stellan said softly, "would you like to hold him?" "Ja, Oscari." I moved forward carefully, accepted the small, warm weight of my grandson into my arms. He weighed almost nothing, an impossibly fragile bundle of new life. And I completely fell apart. Tears coursed down my weathered cheeks as I gazed down at this brand new human being, my grandson, my son's child, representing the next chapter of a family that had come perilously close to destroying itself completely. "Hello there, Owen," I whispered to him. "I'm your grandfather. Your father is in the process of learning what it truly means to build something with lasting value, and I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure you grow up understanding these lessons too." Stellan observed me holding his son, and I recognized something in his expression that had been absent for years. Genuine humility, authentic gratitude, real understanding beginning to take root. Before departing the hospital, I gestured for Stellan to step into the hallway with me for a private word. "I push you hard because life will push you even harder," I told him quietly. "But that doesn't change the fact that I'm still your father. And I want you to know I'm proud that you completed your shift this morning before leaving. That decision required real strength of character. I didn't feel like I had any choice in the matter." "You always have a choice, Stellan. Every single moment of every single day. This morning, you made the right one." I turned to leave, then paused with one more thought. "Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., don't be late." Stellan's response stopped me in my tracks. "Yes, chef." Not dad, not father, chef. For the first time since this arrangement began, he was genuinely accepting the hierarchy of our relationship in this context. Understanding that, within the walls of that kitchen, I wasn't functioning as his father. I was his instructor, his superior, the person he needed to prove himself worthy to. I turned back to look at him one final time, this grown man holding his newborn son with such tender care. "One day down," I said quietly. 364 more to go. And then we'll see if you've truly earned the right to call yourself a father." Half a year had passed since Stellan first walked through my kitchen doors. In that time, he'd transformed from a man broken by his own failures into something resembling a real cook. But technical skill in the kitchen was only part of what I needed to see. What mattered most, was whether he was developing into a person of genuine character. The universe, it seemed, had decided it was time to put that question to the ultimate test. Stellan had been arriving at 4:55 every morning for the past 30 days straight, 5 full minutes ahead of schedule. Not once had he been late. Not once had he offered an excuse or asked for special treatment. His technical abilities had progressed remarkably. While not yet at the level of mastery, he'd achieved solid competence. He could fully butcher and break down a whole chicken in less than 3 minutes now. He could process 50 pounds of vegetables for prep without a single complaint passing his lips. During the chaos of lunch rush, he could manage his station without falling behind, or requiring assistance from the other cooks. But those weren't the changes that truly mattered to me. The real transformation was visible in how he interacted with the people around him. From my office window, I observed Stellan working with Marcus, a 25-year-old we'd brought onto the team just a month ago from St. Vincent's shelter. Stellan was demonstrating the proper technique for dicing onions, and his demeanor was patient, encouraging. reminiscent of how I used to teach him these same skills when he was just a boy learning his way around a kitchen. You need to keep your fingers curled back like this. Stellan was explaining, his voice calm and instructive. See how the knife rocks back and forth? You're not hacking at it. You're guiding the blade through. It's about control, not force. Marcus attempted the technique again, his movements still uncertain, but improving. When he managed to clean even dice, Stellan's face broke into a genuine smile of approval. Roy materialized at my shoulder, arms crossed as he watched the scene unfold below. The kid's really coming along, boss. And I mean really. He cares now. You can see it in everything he does. You genuinely think so. I don't just think it. I know it for a fact. Roy's weathered face was serious. Last Tuesday evening, he stayed back after his shift ended, spent 2 extra hours helping Marcus practice his station work and knife techniques. Didn't ask for overtime pay. Didn't make a big production out of it. Just stayed because Marcus needed the help. Aaron's voice drifted over from his position at the grill station. He did the same thing for me last month. When I was going through, one of my rough patches. He paused and I understood immediately what he meant: Aaron's ongoing battle with staying sober. Stellan talked me through it, made sure I didn't do something stupid, actually walked me all the way home to make sure I got there safe. I gave a slow nod of acknowledgement, processing this information. The other staff members had developed genuine respect for Stellan now, and critically that respect hadn't been inherited from his previous position of authority, or demanded through intimidation. He had earned it through consistent actions and authentic care for the people around him. That afternoon, as Stellan was hauling bags of trash out to the dumpster behind the restaurant, I noticed through my office window that someone was approaching him. A man in an expensive tailored suit, the kind that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. I remained in my office, but my attention was completely focused on the scene unfolding in the alley. I could read their body language even without hearing the words. The way Stellan stopped in his tracks, clearly surprised by this unexpected encounter. The confident, almost aggressive posture of the suited man. I didn't go outside to intervene or eavesdrop, but I watched every moment of their interaction with careful attention. Later that evening, after the dinner service had concluded and the kitchen was winding down, Stellan appeared in the doorway of my office. I was seated at my desk, working my way through a stack of invoices and supplier contracts. "Dad, do you have a minute? I need to ask you about something." "Of course, always." He settled into the chair across from my desk, and I noticed immediately that his hands were restless, fidgeting with the edge of his chef's coat. Whatever was on his mind was clearly causing him significant internal conflict. Something happened today. Someone made me an offer. He began his words careful and measured. "Chad Brennan, we used to work together back in my old life. He's apparently in the process of launching a new restaurant group. High-end concept, exclusive clientele, very upscale." "I see. And what exactly did Mr. Brennan want from you?" "He offered me a partnership stake in the venture, $200,000 up front as a signing bonus, 50% equity ownership in the company. He said I could be in a leadership position again, that I could build something that's truly mine on my own terms." I set down my pen, deliberately giving him my complete attention. "And what was your response to this offer?" I told him I needed time to think it through carefully. Stellan's eyes lifted to meet mine. "What do you think I should do? Should I accept it?" I studied his face for a long moment, recognizing this for exactly what it was. This was the critical moment I'd been anticipating, the true test of whether the past 6 months had fundamentally changed him or merely temporarily humbled him. "Let me ask you something," I said slowly. "Are you trying to run before you've fully learned how to walk again? I honestly don't know how to answer that." He ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "Part of me wants to prove that I'm capable of succeeding on my own terms now. That all of this," he gestured vaguely around the office encompassing the kitchen beyond, "that everything I've learned here actually means something, that I've genuinely changed. Stellan, nobody achieves success in isolation. It's a myth we tell ourselves." I leaned back in my chair. When I rebuilt my life from nothing, I wasn't alone. I had Max Westbrook's financial backing and business guidance. I had Roy's loyalty and work ethic. I had Ron's reliability, Aaron's determination, Sister Agnes's compassion and support. I had an entire community of people who chose to believe in me when I had absolutely nothing to offer them in return. Real lasting success is never a solitary achievement. I leaned forward across the desk, making sure he understood the weight of what I was about to say. "So, the question you need to ask yourself isn't whether you're capable of succeeding. I already know you are. The real question is this: who do you want to succeed alongside? Do you want to build something with people who genuinely care about you as a human being? Or do you want to partner with people who see you as nothing more than a business transaction, a means to their own ends? If you were in my position, what would you do? I can't answer that for you, son. This is your test to pass or fail, not mine. Whatever decision you make, you're going to have to live with the consequences of that choice. Nobody else can make it for you. The following morning, I found myself with business to attend to at the bank located directly across the street from a particular coffee shop. Pure coincidence, naturally. Or perhaps not entirely coincidental. Perhaps I was aware that Stellan had arranged to meet Chad Brennan at that specific coffee shop at 10 o'clock that morning. Through the large plate glass window, I had a clear view of their meeting. I watched them settle into chairs at a corner table. Watched Chad produce a folder of documents and slide them across the table towards Stellan. Legal contracts, most likely. Partnership agreements, financial terms. Stellan picked up the papers, spent several minutes reading through them, carefully, his expression unreadable. Then he set them back down on the table between them, and shook his head in clear refusal. Chad's face transformed, immediately flushing an angry red. His gestures became sharp and aggressive as he clearly tried to argue his case to change Stellan's mind. Stellan responded with words I couldn't hear from my distance, but his body language spoke volumes. His posture remained firm, unwavering, resolute in his decision. Then Stellan stood from the table, extended his hand across the space, offering a handshake that would have allowed them to part on professional terms. Chad didn't accept it. He left Stellan's hand hanging in the air, ignored and rejected. Stellan withdrew his hand without visible reaction and walked out of the coffee shop. I quickly ducked into the entrance of the bank, my heart hammering against my ribs with pride and relief. Through the glass doors, I watched Stellan stride past on the sidewalk, his path leading directly back towards second helpings. His shoulders were squared. His pace was confident and steady. There was no hesitation in his movements, no second-guessing visible in his bearing. He had made his choice, and it was the right one. When I returned to the restaurant, I made certain to give the impression that I'd been there all morning, never having left. Stellan came through the back entrance, collected his apron from its hook, tied it with practiced efficiency, and moved directly to his prep station without fanfare or announcement. Roy caught my eye from across the kitchen. He raised one questioning eyebrow, silently asking if I knew what had transpired. I gave the slightest shake of my head. Not yet. This wasn't the moment. As the evening service concluded and the kitchen was being cleaned and shut down for the night, Roy found me in my office once more. "Boss, I've been thinking. The 1-year anniversary is coming up next month. We're almost there." I'm well aware of that fact. "So what happens then? You planning to return those 2 restaurant locations to him, like you promised when this all started?" I turned my gaze toward the kitchen window. Stellan was still there, meticulously cleaning and sanitizing his station with the same attention to detail he brought to food preparation. As I watched, he called Marcus over and began demonstrating the proper technique for sanitizing a cutting board, the correct chemicals to use, the necessary contact time, the importance of thorough cleanliness in preventing cross-contamination. "If he deserves to have them back," I said carefully, "then yes, we'll see how things stand when that day arrives." 12 months ago, I had made it clear to my son that forgiveness couldn't be purchased with apologies or empty promises. Tonight, standing in the restored dining room of the original Bishop's kitchen, I was finally prepared to deliver my verdict. The restaurant looked remarkably similar to how it had appeared 3 decades earlier, when Catherine and I first opened these doors full of hope and determination. Over the past 6 months, I'd personally overseen every detail of its restoration, installing new hardwood flooring that gleamed under the lights, applying fresh coats of paint in the warm cream color Catherine had always loved, replacing all the broken and outdated equipment with professional-grade appliances that actually functioned properly. The dining room radiated a welcoming warmth beneath vintage Edison bulbs suspended from the ceiling, each table dressed with proper cloth linens and set with my mother's antique china that I'd kept stored away for special occasions. This evening wasn't simply another meal. This was something far more significant, a ritual, a reckoning, a moment of judgment. Stellan and Ashley were the first to arrive, with young Owen wobbling uncertainly between them on chubby, unsteady legs. At 1 year old, he was just beginning to master the complex mechanics of walking. His tiny hands reached out constantly, grasping at everything within his limited range, with fingers perpetually sticky from exploration and discovery. Max Westbrook arrived next impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that likely carried a price tag exceeding what most families earned in several months. But tonight, the expensive clothing and the billions in his bank account were irrelevant. Tonight he wasn't here as a powerful businessman or wealthy investor. He was here as family. Roy, Ron, and Aaron entered together, these three men who had witnessed Stellan's complete transformation over the past year from an arrogant, entitled CEO who thought his business degree made him superior into a humble line cook who understood that real value came from honest work and genuine care for others. Sister Agnes arrived as well, the compassionate nun who had given me shelter and purpose when I'd possessed absolutely nothing. She had been the first person to see past my circumstances and recognize the skill and dignity that still resided within me. And there, seated in a corner chair with quiet dignity, was Florence Westbrook, Alex's elderly mother. At 85 years old, she tired easily these days, her energy depleting quickly. But she had insisted on attending tonight, despite the physical difficulty it presented for her. We gathered around the tables. We ate together. Every dish that emerged from the kitchen had been prepared by my own hands recipes that Stellan and I had developed together over the course of this transformative year, each one representing a lesson learned or a bridge rebuilt. When the meal concluded, I rose slowly to my feet. The room fell into expectant silence. 12 months ago. I began my voice carrying clearly through the quiet space. I told Stellan that forgiveness wasn't something I could simply hand him, that he would need to earn it back, not through words or apologies, through sustained actions and genuine change. Stellan's knuckles went white as his hands clenched the cloth napkin in his lap. Ashley's hand found his arm squeezing gently in support. He worked for 365 consecutive days. He scrubbed floors until his knees ached and his back screamed in protest. He burned his hands on hot pans and sharp knives. He swallowed his considerable pride every single morning when he walked through that kitchen door. He showed up faithfully even when his entire body protested, even when every fiber of his ego was telling him to quit this humiliating exercise and walk away. I paused deliberately, allowing the weight of those words to settle over the room. Then I looked directly at my son. But Stellan, that's not the reason I'm forgiving you tonight. His eyes widened in surprise and confusion. Just 2 weeks ago, I stood in my office and watched you through the window. You were teaching Marcus, that young kid we hired from the streets who had nothing and nobody. I watched the patience in your movements, the encouragement in your voice, the genuine care in how you guided his hands to show him the proper technique. I'd never seen that depth of compassion in you before. My voice began to crack with emotion. I watched you give that boy the exact same kind of second chance that you'd been given. I watched you make the conscious choice to lift another human being up, to invest in his success instead of climbing over him to advance your own position. Tears were building behind my eyes now, threatening to spill over. That is why I forgive you today, Stellan. Not because you endured hardship or suffered consequences, because you fundamentally learned what it means to serve others, because you transformed from someone who used people into someone who elevates them. I reached down beside my chair and retrieved a leather folder I'd placed there earlier. With deliberate ceremony, I slid it across the white tablecloth toward him. As I promised you 1 year ago, I'm returning ownership and management of 2 restaurant locations to you. This isn't a gift given out of sentimentality or family obligation. This is something you've earned through your actions and your growth. You'll manage these locations with full operational authority. I'll serve as an advisor when you need guidance. Max will oversee the financial aspects and help you avoid the mistakes that destroyed you before. But these restaurants are yours to operate. Now you need to prove that the lessons you've learned this year weren't temporary, that they've become part of who you are. Stellan stared down at the legal documents as though they might vanish if he looked away. Tears began streaming freely down his face, cutting tracks through his composure. Dad, I don't have words adequate for what I'm feeling right now. Oh, then say this instead. Promise me you'll never forget what it felt like to lose everything and have to earn it all back from nothing. Promise me you'll teach Owen. I extended my hand across the table, my fingers gently touching my grandson's impossibly soft hair. That respect and authority aren't inherited or demanded. They're earned through character and action day after day after day. I promise, Stellan managed to choke out through his tears. On everything I hold sacred, on Mom's memory, on Owen's future, I promise you, Dad. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Max caught my attention and gestured toward the kitchen. I followed him into the familiar space where so much of this journey had unfolded. Warren, can I ask you something that's been bothering me?" His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, unusual for a man usually so confident. "Doesn't it bother you at all? The fact that biologically I'm Stellan's father, that you invested 42 years doing all the incredibly hard work of actually raising him, and now I just get to stand back and watch the victory celebration." I turned to face him, fully considering my words carefully. "Alex, you contributed DNA to Stellan's existence. Genetic material, that's all. I gave him skinned knees that I cleaned and bandaged, bedtime stories read in funny voices until my throat was sore, patient lessons in tying shoelaces and riding bicycles, comfort during nightmares, guidance through failures, and celebrations of successes. So, tell me honestly which one of those things actually makes someone a father." Max remained silent for a long moment, processing the weight of that question. "Do you think I should tell him the truth about his biological parentage?" he finally asked. "Perhaps someday when the time is right," I acknowledged. "When he's emotionally strong enough and secure enough in his identity to hear that information without it derailing all the progress he's made. But right now, he needs to consolidate everything he's learned this year. He needs to build on this foundation. Introducing questions about biology and paternity would complicate that process unnecessarily. It would give him something external to focus on instead of continuing his internal growth. You're a better man than I could ever aspire to be, Warren. Then aspire to be a better mentor to him moving forward. Help me continue guiding him as he takes on these new responsibilities. That's the role you can fill now. That's how you can truly contribute to his life." The dining room gradually emptied as people said their goodbyes and departed into the night. Eventually, just 4 of us remained in the kitchen: myself, Stellan, little Owen, and Max, observing quietly from his position near the doorway. I lifted Owen carefully and set him on the stainless steel prep counter, supporting him securely with one hand, while using the other to gesture toward the fresh herbs I'd laid out for tomorrow's prep work. "Can you smell this, little man, right here? This is fresh basil." Owen released a delighted giggle, his tiny fist closing around a basil leaf and crushing it with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a child. The intense aromatic scent immediately filled the air around us, sharp and sweet and alive. Beside me, Stellan had naturally gravitated to a cutting board and begun prepping vegetables. I hadn't asked him to do it. He hadn't asked if I needed help. He simply saw work that needed doing and began doing it the way a real cook operates. His knife work was clean and efficient now, his movements confident and precise. He belonged in this space. He'd finally earned his place here. Ashley pulled out her phone and captured a photograph of the 3 of us, 3 generations of Bishop men in a kitchen, connected by more than biology, bound by lessons learned and grace extended. Roy materialized beside Max in the doorway, both men watching the scene with satisfaction. "You did something remarkable," Roy said quietly to Alex. "Bringing these 2 back together, healing what was broken." "No," Max replied with certainty. "I didn't accomplish that. Warren did all the real work. I simply provided him with an opportunity and the resources to make it possible." "Well, that's what real fathers do, isn't it?" Roy observed. "They create opportunities for growth. They extend chances for redemption, even when maybe especially when we don't deserve them. People have asked me repeatedly over these past months, how can you possibly forgive someone who discarded you like garbage? Someone who called you a burden and threw you out of your home with $500 and orders to disappear by morning. The answer is complex but honest. You don't forgive immediately. You can't. Forgiveness that comes without consequences, without accountability, without genuine repentance and change, that's not forgiveness at all. That's just enabling destructive behavior to continue. My son had to earn back everything he'd lost, not through eloquent apologies or emotional promises, through concrete actions, through demonstrated humility, through the passage of time and the consistency of change behavior. Some people mistakenly believe that forgiveness means forgetting what happened, pretending the pain never existed. That's not what forgiveness is. True forgiveness means remembering the pain, clearly acknowledging its reality and its impact, but consciously choosing growth and restoration over grudges and bitterness. I didn't forgive Stellan primarily for his benefit. I forgave him for Owen's sake. So, that innocent boy could grow up with a father who learned from his catastrophic mistakes instead of repeating them across generations. So he could have a grandfather and father who modeled reconciliation and growth instead of permanent estrangement. They called me a burden and a liability. They threw me out to make room for a baby's nursery, valuing space over relationship. But today I'm not just Stellan's creditor or landlord. I'm not just his last desperate hope for salvation. I'm his father, and after a year of testing and proving and growing, he's finally earned the right to call me that again, with genuine meaning behind the word. I looked around at the 3 generations now sharing this kitchen space, the relationship I'd almost lost forever, the connection I'd painstakingly rebuilt through discipline and grace, and the new life that represented hope and possibility for the future. This I understood with profound clarity is what genuine success actually looks like. Not money or accolades or empire building, but reconciliation, growth, love that's strong enough to demand accountability and patient enough to allow transformation. Before you close this video and move on with your day, I need to share something with you. Something that cost me everything to learn, but might save you from making the same devastating mistakes I did. When I found myself sleeping on that narrow cot in St. Vincent's shelter, staring at a water-stained ceiling with nothing but 2 suitcases and $500 to my name, I prayed to God. Not the casual prayers you whisper before meals or in church on Sundays, but the desperate kind that comes from a soul that's been shattered. I asked him, why did you allow this to happen to me? What did I do to deserve being thrown away by my own son? And you know what? I learned God didn't answer me with words or visions or sudden miracles. He answered me through people, through Sister Agnes, who saw dignity in a homeless old man, through Roy and Aaron, who showed me that second chances create ripples, through Max, who recognized talent buried under circumstances, through every single person who chose to believe in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. God doesn't always rescue you from the storm battering your life. Sometimes, often actually, he teaches you how to build a boat strong enough to survive it. That's the harder lesson. That's the one that actually transforms you. Looking back at my own family story now, with the clarity that only comes from surviving family betrayal and choosing forgiveness over bitterness, here's what I desperately wish I'd done differently. I wish I'd taught Stellan about humility and genuine service before I handed him an empire built on 40 years of sweat and sacrifice. I wish I'd made him work the line alongside minimum wage cooks when he was 20 years old, not 35. I wish I'd shown him earlier that respect isn't something you inherit from your father's reputation. It's something you earn through your own character and actions, one honest shift at a time. Don't make the mistakes I made. Don't wait for crisis and catastrophe to teach your children what truly matters in life. Teach them now while there's still time. Make them work for what they want instead of handing them everything. Show them that family betrayal often comes not from malice, but from never learning the value of what you've been given. Show them that the most important lessons in life aren't learned in business schools or from success. They're learned from failure, from humility, from having to rebuild yourself from absolute nothing. If you're a father who's been wronged, who's experienced the particular agony of family betrayal from your own children, understand this. Revenge that destroys teaches nothing. But accountability that demands growth, that's love in its most powerful form. The sweetest possible outcome isn't watching your child crash and burn. It's watching them become the person you always knew they could be, not through your bitterness and punishment, but through your willingness to believe in their capacity for transformation. Here's my deepest conviction about this entire family story. Blood and DNA don't make you family. Showing up consistently makes you family. I raised a boy who wasn't mine biologically, and through 42 years of skinned knees and bedtime stories and patient lessons, he became more mine than genetics could ever accomplish. That's not weakness or foolishness. That's the strongest kind of love that exists. And Stellan, over the course of that brutal transformative year, he finally learned that being a man isn't about wielding power or demanding respect, or sitting in corner offices making decisions that affect other people's lives. It's about service. It's about choosing the hard right path over the easy wrong one, especially when nobody's watching. It's about lifting others up instead of climbing over them. This family story taught me one final irreplaceable lesson. Forgiveness without accountability and consequences is just enabling destructive behavior to continue. But accountability without underlying love is just cruelty dressed up as justice. You need both elements working together, always both. The tension between them is where genuine transformation happens. I didn't forgive Stellan primarily for his benefit. I forgave him for Owen's sake so that innocent boy could grow up with a father who learned from catastrophic mistakes instead of repeating them across generations. so he could witness reconciliation instead of permanent estrangement. They called me a burden and a liability. They threw me out into the rain to make room for a baby's nursery. But today, I'm not just Stellan's creditor or his last desperate hope for salvation. I'm his father, and after 365 days of testing and proving and growing, he's finally earned the right to call me that again, with genuine meaning behind the word. If this family story moves something in you tonight, if you've ever felt discarded or betrayed by the people who should have protected you, if you've wondered whether it's possible to rebuild after complete devastation, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling me your own story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it right now. Maybe a father who's struggling with similar pain, or a son who needs to understand what it means to earn back broken trust. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and turn on those notifications. The stories we share here aren't just entertainment to pass the time. They're mirrors that help us see ourselves more clearly. They're lessons that can help us avoid devastating mistakes. They're living proof that second chances are absolutely possible if you're willing to do the hard work they require. A word of caution before you continue to our next story. The content on this channel includes fictionalized elements and dramatized situations, created specifically for educational and reflective purposes. These narratives are designed to explore meaningful themes about family forgiveness and personal growth. If this style of content doesn't resonate with you or suit your preferences, please feel free to exit now and find something that serves you better. No judgment whatsoever, just respect for your time and your choices about what you consume. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me all the way to the end of this journey, for listening to an old chef pour out his soul about the hardest, most painful year of his entire life, and somehow also the best year. The year that broke him down completely and rebuilt him into someone stronger. Now go. Cook something with genuine love and care. Embrace your family while you still can. Extend grace when it's difficult. Demand accountability when it matters. And remember these words. You're never too old to start over from nothing. You're never too broken to rebuild yourself into something beautiful. And you're never just a burden to the people who truly love you. God bless you. And may your own family story be filled with more grace than pain, more reconciliation than regret.